The cold wind howled over the vast white plains of the icy planet, cutting through even the thickest layers of clothing. Jace pulled his hood tighter around his face and adjusted the heavy gloves on his hands. The planet, known as Glacia, was one of the coldest places in the galaxy. Few dared to visit, and fewer stayed for long. But Jace had made this frozen world his home. His shelter was small, a dome-shaped igloo built from specially made ice bricks that kept the biting wind outside and warmth inside. Inside, a small heater hummed quietly, filling the room with a gentle heat that kept frost from creeping on the windows. It wasn't a palace, but it was safe and warm, and for Jace, that was enough. Jace had come here as part of a research mission, but after the mission ended, he decided to stay. The silence, the isolation, they gave him peace. No loud cities, no endless crowds, no demands. Just the cold, the stars, and his own thoughts. One night, the wind was stronger than usual. The snow danced and swirled, creating small waves over the frozen ground. Jace was checking his sensors when his comm beeped suddenly. Movement detected outside. The machine's voice announced softly. Jace frowned. He had not seen any visitors for weeks. No ships had passed. No messages had come through. Something was out there. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside, the cold air hitting his face like a wall. His breath turned into mist in front of him. He looked around carefully. Then, something caught his eye. Near the edge of the clearing, just outside the range of his igloo's lights, a small shape lay half buried in the snow. Jace's heart quickened. He hurried over, crunching through the snow. As he got closer, he could see a figure, a being, unlike any he had seen before. Her skin shimmered faintly, like ice crystals reflecting light. Her hair was long and flowing, a strange silver-blue color. She was wrapped in a thin, delicate suit that did not seem to protect her from the freezing temperatures. She was shivering, barely moving. Jace knelt beside her and gently shook her shoulder. "Hey," he said softly. "Can you hear me?" The alien blinked, her large eyes focusing slowly on his face. She tried to speak, but only a weak, breathy sound came out. Jace quickly made a decision. "I need to get you inside." He lifted her carefully and carried her back to the igloo. The cold was dangerous, and she would not survive long out there. Inside, he laid her down near the heater and pulled off his jacket to cover her. The warmth began to seep into her frozen body, and her shivering slowed. Jace watched her closely. He had seen many strange creatures in his time, but she was special, fragile and beautiful, with an air of mystery. After some minutes, she tried to speak again. "My home. Far," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. Jace nodded. "You're far from home. Where is that?" She looked at him with eyes full of hope and pain, but did not answer. Jace understood. She was lost, alone and scared. He went to his supplies and returned with a warm drink. "Here, try this." She took the cup carefully and drank. Her body relaxed a little. Jace sat down beside her. "I'm Jace. I live here. You're safe." The alien tried to smile but only managed a small nod. The night outside raged on, but inside the igloo, there was warmth, safety, and a strange new connection forming between two very different beings. Jace wondered what had brought her here, and more importantly, what would happen next. The next morning, sunlight, soft and pale, filtered through the frosted windows of the igloo. Jace stirred awake to the quiet hum of his heater. He glanced over to where the alien woman lay wrapped in warm blankets. She was awake, her bright eyes watching him with curiosity. Jace smiled gently. "Good morning. How do you feel?" She blinked slowly and tried to answer, but the words came out broken and strange. "Cold. World. No like." Jace nodded. He guessed she meant the planet was too cold for her species. That made sense. Her skin looked fragile, almost like crystal, and her body was not built to handle the freezing temperatures of Glacia. He decided to call her Lyra, a name that felt soft and fitting. Over the hours, Jace tried to learn more about her. He pulled out a small tablet where he had stored different languages and images from across the galaxy. Using pictures, sounds, and gestures, he slowly communicated with Lyra. She pointed to an image of a warm, bright star and made a gesture like she was wrapped in light and heat. Then she pointed to herself and shivered again. Jace understood. She came from a hot planet, one with plenty of sunlight, maybe like a desert or tropical world. But Glacia was the exact opposite, cold, dark, and icy. Lyra's eyes grew distant for a moment. She looked around the igloo as if searching for something or someone. Jace felt a strange pull of sympathy. "You're far from home. Do you want to go back?" Lyra nodded, but her expression was filled with worry. She shook her head slowly and pointed outside, to the endless white snow. Jace's heart sank. Whatever had happened to her, she was stranded on this frozen world, and there was no easy way home. He thought about the communications equipment he had outside. Maybe he could send a message, a signal to her people, or to any passing ships. But first, Lyra needed to be safe. As the day passed, Jace prepared some warm clothes he had made from special materials. They were thick, insulated, and able to keep out even the coldest winds. He handed a small set to Lyra, helping her dress carefully. Lyra looked at herself in a small mirror. She seemed surprised to feel warm and comfortable for the first time since arriving on Glacia. Jace smiled. "Better." She nodded, a small smile breaking through. But there was still a sadness in her eyes. Jace realized she missed more than warmth. She missed her home, her life, her people. Later that evening, Jace sat with Lyra beside the small heater, sharing stories about Earth, about space, about the stars. He told her about humanity's adventures, their mistakes, and their hope. Lyra listened quietly, sometimes nodding, sometimes speaking in soft words that Jace could not understand, but her eyes shone with interest. Then, suddenly, she reached out and touched Jace's hand gently. The touch was light but powerful. Jace felt a warmth spread from her fingertips through his whole body. It was like a small fire, comforting and bright. He looked at her in surprise. Lyra smiled shyly. "Warm, thanks." Jace smiled back. He realized then that warmth wasn't just about temperature, it was about connection, trust, and care. But as the days passed, the quiet peace of the igloo was broken by strange noises outside. One night, Jace heard low rumbling sounds coming from the frozen plains. He looked out the window and saw flickering lights far away, moving closer. He grabbed his binoculars and focused on the lights. "They're ships," he whispered. "Alien ships." Lyra's eyes widened with fear. She stood quickly and pulled Jace's sleeve. Danger," she said simply. Jace's mind raced. Who were these ships? Why were they here? And did they mean to harm Lyra? He didn't have much time. "We need to prepare," he said firmly. For the first time since Lyra arrived, Jace felt a fierce protective instinct rise within him. He would not let anything happen to her. Not here. Not now. Together, they started to plan. Jace showed Lyra how to use his equipment, sensors, alarms, and simple defenses. Lyra, despite her fragile appearance, surprised Jace with her quick learning and calm focus. When they finished, Lyra looked at Jace and nodded. "We fight," she said. Jace smiled, amazed by her courage. That night, as the cold wind continued to howl outside, Jace and Lyra sat together in the warmth of the igloo, ready for whatever the coming days would bring. They were strangers from different worlds, brought together by fate, by survival, and now by a growing bond neither had expected. Jace wondered, could they really face the universe together? Or was this just the beginning of a much larger journey? The frozen world of Glacia was quiet again, but inside the small igloo, a different kind of energy filled the air. Jace and Lyra sat near the heater, their faces glowing softly in the warm light. After the day's work preparing defenses, there was a moment of calm, a chance to learn more about each other. Jace looked at Lyra. Her eyes, still bright and curious, held a hint of sadness beneath their shine. He knew she missed her home, a place of heat and light, so different from the endless ice outside. He wanted to help her feel less alone. "Tell me about your world," Jace said softly. "Where are you from?" Lyra's eyes widened slightly. She reached into a small pouch at her side and pulled out a thin, glowing crystal. It pulsed with a soft blue light. She held it carefully between her fingers. "This," she said, "is from my home. Star of Fire." Jace studied the crystal. It felt warm to the touch, unlike anything he had ever seen. "A star of fire," he repeated. Lyra nodded. She touched the crystal to her chest, then pointed upward through the igloo's frosted ceiling. "Sun," she said simply. Jace smiled. "Yes, our sun is a star of fire too. But your planet is very different." Lyra nodded again and began making a series of simple gestures, arms wide and open, then wrapped tight around herself, shivering. "Hot, cold." "No," she said. "Cold, bad." Jace understood. Her people needed warmth to live. Glecia's icy cold was a cruel enemy. He reached out, placing a warm hand over hers. The contact seemed to comfort her. "Don't worry," Jace said quietly. "We'll find a way to help you." Lyra looked up at him, hope flickering in her eyes. For days, Jace and Lyra worked together. They shared stories, memories, and dreams. Though their languages were different, they found ways to communicate through gestures, drawings, and the small tablet with universal images. Lyra taught Jace about her people, how they lived in a sunlit world filled with heat and light, how they moved with grace and speed, and how their bodies thrived on energy from their star. She spoke of great cities made of crystal and fire, and of vast deserts where the sun blazed like a golden sea. Jace told her about Earth, his home planet, with its oceans, forests, and skies filled with birds. He spoke of humans, sometimes flawed but always full of hope and courage. Their worlds were so different, yet in this little igloo on a frozen planet, they found a connection. One evening, as the wind howled outside, Lyra surprised Jace. She reached out and touched his cheek gently. "You, warm," she said, "not just body." Jace's heart quickened. He smiled softly. "Not just body," he agreed. The ice between them seemed to melt, replaced by something deeper. Friendship, trust, and maybe even something more. But life on Glacio was harsh and dangerous. The threat of the alien scouts still hung over them like a shadow. One morning, as Jace checked the sensors outside, Lyra joined him. "They come?" she asked quietly. Jace nodded. "Yes, soon." Lyra's face hardened with determination. "We fight." Jace admired her courage. Together, they spent the day preparing traps around the igloo. Jace showed Lyra how to use some simple technology: motion sensors, alarms, and even a small energy pulse device that could stun attackers briefly. Lyra watched carefully, her body moving with grace and speed despite the cold clothes she wore. "Good," she said. "You learned fast." Jace laughed. "You're a good teacher." As night fell, they sat together, waiting and watching. Suddenly, a flicker of light appeared on the horizon. Then more lights, moving fast through the snow. "They're here," Jace whispered. Lyra stood quickly. "Ready." The alien scouts moved closer, their shapes strange and menacing. They were not like Lyra. Their bodies were covered in heavy armor, and their eyes glowed with cold intelligence. Jace's heart pounded, but he did not panic. He felt calm because he was not alone. Lyra moved beside him, her hand finding his. "Together," she said. The scouts reached the igloo and stopped, sensing the trap. Jace triggered the alarms, and bright lights flashed. Lyra focused her energy through the crystal she carried. A soft blue glow surrounded her hands. She released a pulse of warmth that rippled through the air like a wave. The scouts stepped back, surprised. Jace activated the stun device, sending a short electric shock toward one of the attackers. The scouts stumbled, giving Jace and Lyra time to react. They worked as one, Jace using his technology and quick thinking, Lyra using her alien energy and agility. The fight was short but fierce. The scouts retreated, leaving behind a cold silence. Jace and Lyra breathed deeply, their bodies tired but hearts strong. "We did it," Jace said, smiling. Lyra smiled back. Together. As the stars shone outside, the two looked at each other, two strangers from different worlds, united by courage, warmth, and an unlikely bond on a frozen planet. The cold wind outside the igloo had grown stronger in the days after the scouts' retreat. It whipped the snow into sharp, biting waves that swept over the frozen ground. Inside, Jace and Lyra worked side by side, preparing for what they both knew was coming, a larger attack from the hostile aliens hunting Lyra. Jace checked his equipment for the 100th time that day. Sensors, alarms, the makeshift barriers, all needed to be ready. Every detail mattered. The icy planet was harsh, but the enemy was even more dangerous. Lyra moved beside him, her delicate frame now stronger, filled with determination. Though she still looked fragile in the thick, cold weather clothes Jace had given her, there was a fire in her eyes that could not be frozen. "We must be ready," she said softly, her voice steady. Jace nodded. "They won't stop until they find you." Lyra's jaw tightened. "They want energy." Jace understood. Her bioenergy was rare and valuable. The scouts wanted to capture her for that power. He wished he could do more to protect her. The planet was isolated, and reinforcements were impossible. It was just the two of them, against the cold and the enemy. That night, as the icy darkness settled over Glacia, Jace and Lyra sat together near the small heater inside the igloo. They shared a quiet meal, simple but warm food that Jace had brought from Earth. Lyra looked at Jace. "Why help me?" Jace smiled softly. "Because I don't believe anyone should be alone and scared. And because I trust you." Lyra reached out, taking his hand gently. The warmth between them was real, more than just the heater's heat. "Together," she whispered. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed outside. Both jumped up, alert. Jace moved to the door, looking through the thick ice window. Far off in the snowy plain, he saw dark shapes moving quickly through the storm. "The scouts," he said grimly. Lyra's eyes shone with fierce light. "We fight." Jace prepared the defenses they had set up. The motion sensors would trigger alarms. The traps would slow the attackers. The stun device could give them a chance to escape or fight back. But even with all these, the enemy was strong and clever. Minutes later, the igloo shook as the scouts closed in. Outside, snow exploded into the air from their rapid movements. The door shook violently as the first scout tried to break in. Jace grabbed a reinforced panel and secured it. Lyra moved beside him, her fingers glowing faintly with blue energy from the crystal she carried. "They want you," she said, "but they will not take you." The scouts began their assault, pounding on the igloo with heavy tools. The alarms blared and bright lights flashed, confusing the attackers. Lyra stepped forward, releasing a wave of warmth that made the cold air ripple like heat rising from a desert. One scout lunged toward the igloo's side window, but Jace was ready. He activated the stun pulse, sending a shock that knocked the alien back. The fight was tense. Jace and Lyra worked together seamlessly. His human technology combined with her alien power created a defense neither could have made alone. Despite their efforts, the scouts were persistent. They battered the igloo, trying every way to get inside. Suddenly, a large section of the igloo cracked under the pressure. Jace's heart raced. "We can't hold much longer." Lyra's eyes glowed brighter. She raised her hands, focusing the crystal's energy. A warm light spread outward, pushing back the cold and the attackers. The scouts hesitated, startled by the sudden force. Jace took the chance. Run. Together, they dashed through a hidden tunnel Jace had dug under the igloo, a secret escape route to the safety of nearby ice caves. Snow whipped their faces as they hurried through the dark tunnel. The scouts tried to follow, but the narrow path slowed them. Once inside the cave, Jace sealed the entrance with blocks of ice, buying precious time. They leaned against the cold walls, breathing heavily. Lyra looked at Jace with gratitude. "You saved me." Jace smiled. "We saved each other." The cave was dark but safe for now. Jace pulled out a small heater and turned it on. The warmth filled the small space, and Lyra relaxed a little. As the storm raged outside, they sat close together, sharing their strength. Jace thought about the battle. The scouts were relentless, and their technology was strong. They would come back with more forces. But he also thought about Lyra's courage, her strength, and the bond growing between them. "We'll face them," he said quietly. "Together." Lyra nodded. "Together." The storm outside was fierce, but inside the cave, two unlikely friends found warmth and hope in the coldest place in the galaxy. The ice cave was quiet except for the soft hum of Jace's heater and the distant howl of the storm outside. The warmth inside the small cave was a stark contrast to the harsh, frozen world waiting just beyond the entrance. But Jace and Lyra knew their respite was temporary. The scouts would not give up easily. Jace rubbed his hands together, staring at the icy walls. "We can't stay here forever," he said. "They'll find us if we don't do something." Lyra nodded. "We fight, but smarter." Jace smiled at her determination. Despite her fragile appearance, Lyra's spirit was strong, stronger than many humans he had met. Together, they had survived their first attack. Now, they had to be clever. "Let's use the environment," Jace suggested. "Glacia is cold and dangerous, but it can be an ally." Lyra looked thoughtful. "Trap. Ice. Sharp." "Exactly," Jace said, excitement growing. "We can set traps that use the ice itself. Slippery surfaces, hidden crevices, even falling icicles." Lyra's eyes sparkled. "Yes, we use their strength against them." Over the next day, they worked hard, building traps around the cave's entrance and nearby paths. Jace used pieces of old equipment and wires to create tripwires and alarms. Lyra used her knowledge of energy to create small bursts of heat that would cause sudden ice shifts, making the ground dangerous for their pursuers. They moved quietly, careful not to leave signs of their work. As they labored, their teamwork grew stronger. Lyra's grace and speed balanced Jace's knowledge and experience. They spoke less with words and more through actions, understanding each other's needs without much explanation. One evening, after a long day of building traps, they sat together, sharing a simple meal. Lyra looked at Jace and smiled softly. "You teach me." Jace laughed. "And you teach me too." She nodded. "Different, but strong." Jace reached out, taking her hand gently. Together, stronger. The bond between them deepened, not just survival, but friendship and trust. The next morning, the scouts returned. This time, they came in greater numbers, moving carefully across the icy plain. Jace and Lyra waited, hidden behind a large ice ridge near the cave entrance. As the first scouts stepped into the trap area, they triggered a tripwire. A sharp icicle, hanging from a high ledge, fell with a crack, landing right in the path of the closest scout. The alien stumbled, losing balance on the slippery ice. Another burst of heat from Lyra caused a sudden ice shift, throwing a group off their feet. Jace quickly activated a small energy net, capturing two scouts and stopping their advance. The fight was intense but shorter this time. The scouts were confused and slowed by the traps. They retreated, leaving behind some of their own equipment. Jace and Lyra moved swiftly, gathering what they could. "We hurt them," Jace said with a smile. Lyra nodded. "Smarter, stronger." The victory lifted their spirits, but they knew it was only the beginning. That night, as they rested, Jace looked at Lyra and spoke quietly. "We can't keep hiding forever. You need to get home." Lyra's smile faded. "I don't know how." Jace nodded. "I'll help. We'll fix your ship." Lyra's eyes brightened. "Yes, go home." Jace felt a new purpose. Their fight was not just for survival, it was for freedom and hope. Together, they planned the next steps, repairing Lyra's ship, avoiding more scouts, and finding a way off Glacia. Once inside the cave, Jace sealed the entrance with blocks of ice, buying precious time. They leaned against the cold walls, breathing heavily. Lyra looked at Jace with gratitude. "You saved me." Jace smiled. "We saved each other." The cave was dark but safe for now. Jace pulled out a small heater and turned it on. The warmth filled the small space, and Lyra relaxed a little. As the storm raged outside, they sat close together, sharing their strength. Jace thought about the battle. The scouts were relentless, and their technology was strong. They would come back with more forces. But he also thought about Lyra's courage, her strength, and the bond growing between them. "We'll face them," he said quietly. "Together." Lyra nodded. "Together." The storm outside was fierce, but inside the cave, two unlikely friends found warmth and hope in the coldest place in the galaxy. The ice cave was quiet except for the soft hum of Jace's heater and the distant howl of the storm outside. The warmth inside the small cave was a stark contrast to the harsh, frozen world waiting just beyond the entrance. But Jace and Lyra knew their respite was temporary. The scouts would not give up easily. Jace rubbed his hands together, staring at the icy walls. "We can't stay here forever," he said. "They'll find us if we don't do something." Lyra nodded. "We fight, but smarter." Jace smiled at her determination. Despite her fragile appearance, Lyra's spirit was strong, stronger than many humans he had met. Together, they had survived their first attack. Now, they had to be clever. "Let's use the environment," Jace suggested. "Glacia is cold and dangerous, but it can be an ally." Lyra looked thoughtful. "Trap, ice, sharp." "Exactly," Jace said, excitement growing. "We can set traps that use the ice itself. Slippery surfaces, hidden crevices, even falling icicles." Lyra's eyes sparkled. "Yes, we use their strength against them." Over the next day, they worked hard, building traps around the cave's entrance and nearby paths. Jace used pieces of old equipment and wires to create tripwires and alarms. Lyra used her knowledge of energy to create small bursts of heat that would cause sudden ice shifts, making the ground dangerous for their pursuers. They moved quietly, careful not to leave signs of their work. As they labored, their teamwork grew stronger. Lyra's grace and speed balanced Jace's knowledge and experience. They spoke less with words and more through actions, understanding each other's needs without much explanation. One evening, after a long day of building traps, they sat together, sharing a simple meal. Lyra looked at Jace and smiled softly. "You teach me." Jace laughed. "And you teach me too." She nodded. "Different, but strong." Jace reached out, taking her hand gently. Together, stronger. The bond between them deepened, not just survival, but friendship and trust. The next morning, the scouts returned. This time, they came in greater numbers, moving carefully across the icy plain. Jace and Lyra waited, hidden behind a large ice ridge near the cave entrance. As the first scouts stepped into the trap area, they triggered a tripwire. A sharp icicle, hanging from a high ledge, fell with a crack, landing right in the path of the closest scout. The alien stumbled, losing balance on the slippery ice. Another burst of heat from Lyra caused a sudden ice shift, throwing a group off their feet. Jace quickly activated a small energy net, capturing 2 scouts and stopping their advance. The fight was intense but shorter this time. The scouts were confused and slowed by the traps. They retreated, leaving behind some of their own equipment. Jace and Lyra moved swiftly, gathering what they could. "We hurt them," Jace said with a smile. Lyra nodded. "Smarter, stronger." The victory lifted their spirits, but they knew it was only the beginning. That night, as they rested, Jace looked at Lyra and spoke quietly. "We can't keep hiding forever. You need to get home." Lyra's smile faded. "I don't know how." Jace nodded. "I'll help. We'll fix your ship." Lyra's eyes brightened. "Yes. Go home." Jace felt a new purpose. Their fight was not just for survival. It was for freedom and hope. Together, they planned the next steps, repairing Lyra's ship, avoiding more scouts, and finding a way off Glosia. As the cold night deepened, 2 unlikely friends prepared for the challenges ahead, their courage and teamwork shining like a warm light in the darkest ice. The frozen plains of Glacia stretched endlessly beneath the pale light of distant stars. The cold was relentless, but inside the small igloo hidden within a cluster of ice formations, there was a warmth that no storm could freeze. Jace and Lyra worked side by side, their hands busy with wires, tools, and the delicate parts of Lyra's ship. It was small and fragile, damaged from her crash landing, but it was the key to her freedom and to their future. Jace had never worked on alien technology before, but he learned quickly. Lyra's knowledge helped, and her delicate fingers moved with precision as they adjusted parts, connected circuits, and recharged energy cores. They spoke little, focusing on their task, but the silence between them was comfortable, a sign of their growing bond. Suddenly, Lyra paused, her eyes searching Jace's face. "This will work?" she asked softly. Jace smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "It has to." They had little time. The scouts were still out there, and the longer they stayed on Glacia, the greater the danger. As they finished the last connection, the ship's core began to glow softly, a sign of life returning to the machine. Lyra's face lit up with hope. "We fly soon," she said, her voice strong. But their celebration was short. Outside, a new sound reached their ears. Low, heavy footsteps moving quickly through the snow. Jace looked out the window and saw a large group of scouts approaching. They were bigger and more heavily armed than before. "They're coming," Jace said, his voice steady but tense. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "We fight." Jace nodded. They had no choice. The igloo was their first line of defense. Using the traps they had built, they prepared to slow the enemy's advance. When the scouts reached the igloo, the alarms blared, and icy spikes hidden beneath the snow sprang up, forcing the attackers back. Lyra focused her energy through the glowing crystal, sending waves of warmth that made the icy ground tremble. Jace used his stun device, hitting several scouts with electric pulses that stunned them briefly. The battle was fierce but brief. The scouts were strong but unprepared for the combined power of human technology and alien energy. One by one, they retreated, leaving the field silent once again. Jace and Lyra looked at each other, breathless but victorious. "We turned the tide," Jace said, smiling. Lyra nodded. Together. The next day, they prepared to leave Glacia. Jace helped Lyra into her ship, which now hummed with power and light. She looked back at the icy world, a place of danger and refuge, loneliness and friendship. "Thank you," she said softly, "for warmth, for fight, for hope." Jace smiled. "Come back anytime." With a bright flash, the ship lifted off, soaring into the starry sky. Jace watched until it disappeared beyond the horizon. The cold world was silent once more, but Jace knew this was not the end. Somewhere out there, Lyra's story continued, and so did the bond between 2 very different beings who had found strength in each other. The stars twinkled quietly over the vast icy plains of Glacia. The cold wind had settled into a gentle breeze, and the endless snow sparkled under the pale light of distant suns. But inside the small igloo that once sheltered Jace and Lyra, a new warmth lingered, one that no storm could erase. Jace stood outside, his breath forming soft clouds in the crisp air. He watched the sky, remembering the moment when Lyra's ship had lifted off, a bright flash fading into the stars. Though she was gone, a part of her remained here, with him, in the cold shelter and in his heart. For days after her departure, Jace worked to repair and improve his home. The igloo, once just a simple shelter, now felt alive with the memories of their time together. Every corner held a story. The small crystal Lyra had left behind, the warmth she brought to the cold nights, the courage she had shown. But Jace's mind was not at rest. He knew the universe was vast, full of unknowns, and that their journey was far from over. One morning, as the weak sunlight warmed the frozen ground, Jace checked his communication device, a small antenna he had built to catch distant signals. He hoped for news, a sign that Lyra had reached her home safely. To his surprise, the device crackled with static. Then a clear voice broke through, speaking in a language he didn't understand. But beneath the strange words, he heard something familiar, a warmth, a kindness. Jace's heart leaped. He pressed a button and replied in the simple code he had taught Lyra before she left. "Hello, this is Jace. Are you safe?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then the voice returned, slower and clearer. "Yes, we are safe. We remember. You are welcome." Jace smiled, feeling a connection stretch across the stars. Days turned into weeks, and messages traveled back and forth. Lyra shared stories of her home world, bright, warm, full of light and life. She spoke of her people's gratitude and hope, and of the new adventures ahead. Jace shared his own stories, of Earth and Glacia, of courage and friendship, of the bond they had formed against all odds. The universe no longer felt so lonely. Then, one evening, as the stars shone brightly above, Jace received a message he had not expected. "Come to us," the voice said. "There is a place for you here." His heart raced. An invitation, not just to visit, but to join a new world, a new family. Jace looked around his igloo, the small world he had built in the ice. It was time for a new beginning. He packed his gear, ready to follow the path Lyra had shown him, a path of courage, friendship, and endless stars. As he stepped outside, the cold wind brushed his face, but inside, he felt a fire burning bright. Jace smiled and looked up at the sky. The universe was waiting, and so was a new life.